redefining dignity in modern workplaces. As we're approaching Workers' Day, the conversation is shifting beyond wages and job security towards something deeper, dignity and psychological safety in the workplace. Increasingly, employees are speaking about environments where policies exist on paper, but not always reflected in practice. The disconnect is raising urgent questions about fairness, about accountability, and ethical leadership in modern organizations. We're joined by Kovini Moodley in the studio. She is a governance, risk, and compliance expert, and we're unpacking this even further. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. I love being here.
And I love the outfits.
I tried, guys.
Very on brand. Very, very on brand. Thank you so much. I think it's such an important conversation. When we talk about dignity in the workplace,
Yes.
maybe if we can define what it actually means in the South African context.
You know, I think every year we observe Workers' Day would be an appropriate word.
Yeah.
But
Not celebrate,
for me, we should be celebrating.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, based on my lived experiences and the fact that I mentor a lot of young professionals as well, this seems to be something, you know, that is becoming increasingly challenging in workspaces. Especially something and a topic that I am deeply passionate about is around corporate GBV.
Yeah.
It's something that's not often spoken about. It's something that sits within, I want to say, pretty high-rise buildings, and you know, the outside doesn't reflect what's inside.
Corporate GBV, I don't think I've heard that before. If you can unpack it a little bit more.
Sure.
What is it? How does it show up?
Sure, I think we know about GBV and GBVF.
Yeah.
But this is a specific legal term where there are certain, I want to say, inequalities that happen within a workspace, and it is not physical.
Yeah.
When something is physical, it's always easier to prove.
For sure.
Whereas something that is persistent and, you know, retaliative and over many emails and stuff where you've got to read between the lines is sort of where it starts to, I want to say, fester and grow.
Goodness. And a big part of our conversation is also around psychological safety. And I think it speaks to what you're saying right now. It might be a buzzword that maybe other people have heard, buzz term that other people have heard, but maybe there's a lacking in terms of understanding what does it actually mean when we speak of psychological safety in the workplace.
Yes. So from a governance and a risk perspective, it is very important to note that employers are required to create a psychologically safe environment for people to work and to thrive and to feel safe. But I think there's a lot going on in the world. There's a lot going on with whistleblowing. There's a lot happening. The Matlanga Commission is on behind me, and something that I've been following quite closely. And I think there's definitely a need for organizations as a whole, both in private and the public sector, to really focus on making sure that you are addressing behaviors that do not align with your value system. There's also a Code of Harassment Act in South Africa, and it's very important that you take interventive steps, if I could say that, as soon as a matter is raised. So it's also that element of when you're aware of something, look, this happens within all companies, right? Or most companies, I could say, barring one or two that I've worked for. But I think, you know, it's important that employers take heed of what's being said via an ethics hotline or via other tools where you can, you know, safely report certain instances of harassment, sexual harassment. These are unfortunately realities and challenges that still find its way into corporate workspaces. You know, despite our democracy, despite all the amazing ventures in terms of making our constitution as fair and transparent as possible, it's sad that we still have to sometimes face these kind of challenges.
What do you say to someone who is hearing you but is saying, you know, the workplace is just a microcosm of a greater problem that's happening in society, right? It's not isolated from society and some of these societal ills.
Right. I agree with that. I think
so. It makes it daunting, right?
It makes it daunting because you think you're going to move to the next best thing, and you arrive there and it's pretty much a blueprint. And you know, after experiencing something like this personally, I have, you know, started to offer mentorship and counseling and coaching as such to young individuals who may be facing corporate GBV, and that's
Yeah.
my ability to be able to give back to society.
Right.
And sometimes it's just knowledge is power. You know,
Yes.
if you get that gut feeling inside of you, it often means that we shouldn't ignore that.
For sure.
I think there's many times where I myself have ignored my intuition and it hasn't landed me up in great spaces.
Yeah. And you live to regret.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about, I mean, also something quite important is that many organizations say this, that, and the other in terms of, you know, governance and policies and all of that. And many people do feel like it doesn't fully translate to their experience and how they are going about, you know, navigating the workspace. How does that disconnect even happen?
Sorry, just repeat the disconnect.
I'm saying, how does the disconnect of what exists on paper
on
in terms
paper
of policy and just the environment in itself? I mean, it's all nicely worded, it's nice, and when we come in, we're like, oh my gosh, we're being inducted, we're part of something great, and then the day-to-day doesn't speak to that.
Oh, I love that question, and I get it at a lot of interviews. I think a company can have the most amazing policies, but it is left to your leadership, no one else, your leaders, your exco, your board of directors, to be setting that tone at the top. And if you have a policy around harassment, if you have a policy around workplace bullying, that you are following your own policies. Because in many cases, the marketing strategy is completely different to what you as an employee may be facing on the inside. And that kind of disparity is not great from a reputational perspective, because the truth of the matter is that people talk in their social circles, and marketing is the most powerful tool. Word of mouth is the most powerful tool when it comes to your brand reputation. And you know, you see people that work in certain companies, and you know, they're not sugarcoating. They really love this company because it's brought value to their life. It's aligned with their value systems. And my ask is that if you're in a company, you have the authority to exercise that power, that fiduciary duty that we often read in textbooks. It's time to make sure that your own policies, you know, actually play out the way it's meant to play out. And something disparate is not happening behind the scenes.
How powerful is it for organizations to actually invest in the well-being and cultivating a healthy culture in the workplace? Why does it make sense to approach it in that sense instead of being money focused and profit focused? Why is it so important to pour into your people and invest in ensuring that the workspace is one that makes one proud to be an ambassador of the brand?
Yes. I think for me, there's definitely a balance between profitability and wellness, and the way people feel on that Sunday night, the way your employees feel is a big contributor to brand awareness and your reputation and what people are saying at Bryce. And it is certainly worth it to you know, invest in wellness, to invest in counseling sessions. A lot of employer groups have EAP, which is I think it's Employer Assistance Program, where they offer you legal advice, it's wellness, it's coaching, it's trauma counseling. And that's very important to have. But I think very closely linked to that is psychological safety, because if you're not feeling safe in the environment, you're not going to phone this call center and feel like you can share what's actually happening, because you've got this fear that, you know, after I do this, I'm going to be retaliated against more. I'm going to face more harassment, whatever the case is. I'd rather just keep quiet. And I think that's very important for people to understand that, you know, it's often a third party, but how safe are they to share this information with HR, with the counseling service, and with other leaders in the organization? And I truly believe that the best companies I've worked for have literally, you know, embodied transparency. That's the one thing. You know, open door policy is one thing, but when you go in there, are you feeling safe to say what you need to? For
sure. What is meant by weaponization of disciplinary processes? It sounds like big English.
It's big English, but it's also, I want to say, law English. I've learned a lot about labor law, I want to say, in the last 2 years. And I count that towards my experience and just being able to navigate some of the challenges that are often faced. You know, I've seen cases where someone logs a grievance against a manager that perhaps has been bullying or harassing them, even sexual harassment, and that is silently ignored by the organization. And then suddenly you notice after 8 or 9 months, you get a weird email, you look at it, and it says now you have to attend a disciplinary of inquiry, and that's like a disciplinary hearing.
Right.
So that is, for me, another way of weaponizing your processes to push people out of an organization. Because often people don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to hear what's going wrong. They want this rose-tinted picture of everything that's going right.
Yeah.
But for me, I think true leadership is about wanting to get that feedback, wanting to address issues that leadership may not always be very aware of. And weaponizing is something that has become very common in workplaces. And it is against labor law, it is against the code of harassment. And there's no way that you can suddenly issue a disciplinary hearing without having conversations, having warning letters. There's got to be a trail of evidence as well. But just throwing someone with a disciplinary inquiry, I've seen has also become, sadly, a playbook when people struggle to push you out of an organization.
But oftentimes, those powers win because a lot of the time we are not empowered enough with the information that Kovini has about what my rights are, what the processes are meant to be. So maybe just a call for all of us as workers to familiarize ourselves with what we are supposed to know so that when situations like that arise, we're able to advocate for ourselves.
Absolutely. So the Labor Relations Act is something we should always be aware of. ChatGPT is a big thing these days. We sometimes use it for the wrong purposes.
I asked ChatGPT to motivate me this morning.
Okay, did it work?
Absolutely.
You see? You see, guys, there's power in AI when it's used for empowerment, right? And a simple search about uploading maybe your employment contract, blocking out certain things, and then asking questions thereafter. I think a lot of people forget to upload documents to help the bot to become smarter at answering your questions. And I actually built a bot for myself a few months ago. It was a paid session.
What can you not
and
do?
You learn, and you have this bot that is your own, I want to say like a labor assistant. But I think it's really important that we understand that ChatGPT is more than just pushing out a question and getting an answer. But it's about feeding it the right information and saying, even feed it an email that came to you and you're not too sure, it'll pick up the tone for you.
For sure.
It'll pick up whether there's some nuances that you're not picking up on. So for me, it's very important to understand the terms of your employment because that starts the entire engagement between yourself and an employer. And then, to understand your labor laws that exist within a company. To understand the laws of harassment that you're not allowed to do. You're supposed to create a psychological safe environment for everyone. It's not about level or title.
For sure.
And next up, if you ever find yourself in a situation where that gut feeling is giving you a little sign to say, something doesn't feel quite right here. There's a shift in behavior, there's a shift in the tones of emails that I'm now getting. Guys, please, we spend a lot of money on the wrong things, and I'm guilty of this as well. But, get a consult with a labor attorney in South Africa. There's hundreds, but I can also recommend some if you want to be mentored by
sounding board.
Just a sounding board to say, objectively, this is where I am. What am I missing? And in that one consult, you may get, your own plan, your own strategic plan that you need to start to work on. And sadly, it's often, an exit strategy. And if that's what it needs to be, accept it for what it is and take that knowledge. I always say knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
But also accessing that knowledge at the right time could be, very different from a psychological perspective, from a financial perspective, from an emotional perspective. So my advice is don't wait till things get really, nasty. I want to say nasty. Exactly. And one night when you're randomly looking at your email, you see a notice of inquiry for something that happened 8 months ago. That is not fair. That is not procedurally and substantively fair in terms of the law, but people are still doing it. So there are moments where I have to stop and say, as a proudly South African icon, I have to stop and say, cry our beloved country, because these are public funds that are being utilized in the wrong way.
Sure. We're looking ahead to Workers' Day and redefining dignity in modern workplaces. Kovini Moodley, generous enough to join us in the studio today. She's a governance, risk and compliance expert. Let's talk now about practical steps that organizations can take to rebuild trust with employees. And then when we say organizations, I want to swap that out with leaders, right?
I love it, yes.
And let's talk about, if you are listening as a leader today, taking it upon yourself to wanting to rebuild that trust, that psychological safety that you speak about, and building brand ambassadors for your organization. Where do we begin? What kinds of practical steps can you share with us?
I love that question because based on my 19-year corporate career, it's been a journey. I've worked for some incredible companies, and also the opposite is true. You know, we have to call out the I believe on my social media journey that I committed when I started Boss Babes of South Africa, that I was going to share the good, bad, the ugly, and the very ugly, to show people a reality of what is out there in the world, and not go in there naive, believing the world is all good and you're going to get, you know, what your family gives you. You're going to have a red carpet roll, and you're not going to get the love and respect that you get from your family and the support. Those are important mindsets to start with if you're entering an organization. The next thing, you know, it starts before you actually get hired, is to just take note of the red flags. Especially if you're moving from one job to another. And you know, the job market is tough, I'm not getting away from that, but you know, if you're entering a particular company, because we all have bills to pay, to be honest, and you are entering where you're sitting in a few interviews and something is not feeling quite right, you know, I would say start to research yourself on labor laws, and start, when something happens in a workplace, you can quickly say, okay, it's this part, okay, it's the next, okay, now I'm not imagining. I've got a trail of 11 consequential evidence after I spoke up or I called someone out about it, and you know, this is my evidence. So I think it's important to always have that mindset when you're entering an organization. But more specifically to your question around what can leaders do, I think it is every leader's organization within a company to take ownership for the good and the bad, the success and the failure. And you know, often when there are HR matters or someone is dismissed or, you know, constructively dismissed, we often think, that's an HR issue. It's actually not. From a governance and risk expertise perspective, that is actually a failure of your governance systems, right? Everything is failing below, and now matters been escalated to the board or the, you know, the chief people officer, and that's the first thing, is that you want to be able to have a strategy where your tone at the top translates to the tone at the bottom, and everyone understands this is the playing field. If I step outside of here, this is what I'm going to be held accountable for. And I think one of the most frustrating things is watching some leaders that are tasked with themselves being ambassadors for a brand, right? It doesn't matter as well wherever you work, but having that authority and misusing it. So that misuse of power is something that we need to be very careful about. I think as well, I've been following the law quite I want to say with a lot of attention, and we've all seen what's happened with the judge around sexual harassment, right? That itself should set the tone as to what you should and should not do within a workplace. As soon as there's a power imbalance, please guys, if you're a leader and you're listening to this, don't take a chance. Because the reality is, you may not win from a legal perspective, but you certainly will win from a reputational perspective as an employee, I'm talking about. And then I think it's also very valuable to have that ethics line that I spoke about. You know, a safe space where someone can feel like if you're a whistleblower and you're raising a complaint about something, that it can be dealt with in an appropriate and a sensitive matter. And I think the next thing is to make sure that your policies align with implementation. And that can only happen from the top. You know, there can be elements of where a disciplinary hearing is actioned without the appropriate intention. You know, it's just used to create fear, panic, intimidation. And those, for me, are things that need to be called out by the senior layers within a leadership. That is not something you should be tolerating, because you are then setting a precedence that if one person can do this, everyone can just, you know,
free for all.
Free for all. Look the other side when we show you the Labor Relations Act, and you know, you send out mailers about how ethics matters and culture matters, and yet you're not actually taking that action to hold your own leaders accountable.
It's a matter of integrity, I would say.
Absolutely.
As we reflect on Workers' Day, what do you think should be a focus this time around, maybe in this year going forward, when it comes to labor rights, when it comes to everything that we have spoken about? What do you think we should be focusing our energies on?
I think certainly it's about it's culture all the way. Culture all the way, because some of the best companies I've worked for have had an incredible culture. And they did this without trying.
Yeah.
There was no fancy marketing. There was, for example, the small things. The CEO would come up, tap you on the shoulder and say, "Hi, welcome to this company." And you would be shocked as to how he even knows you at 25 years. You know, how does he know everyone? It's those little details to make people feel like they are valued, that they are assets within an organization.
Absolutely.
And that every night when they drive out, that asset is leaving your business. And you need to make it worth their while to want to keep coming back every day.
Yeah. Oof, love that. Where do we find you?
Yes.
Social media, all of these wonderful things.
The best place, my current favorite platform is LinkedIn.
Oh,
Because I've been having these very real conversations on LinkedIn amongst a few broadcasters. And I think for me, I've started to offer coaching and mentoring to people who may be finding themselves in a predicament where, you know, initially it looks like my boss hates me.
Yeah.
It's often not that, guys. We've got to look deeper. As I say in risk management, everything is about finding the root cause. Right? It's like going to a doctor and he gives you medication and weeks later you're still not better and you're wondering, why am I still not better? It is very important in our own lives and in situations that we face to actually delve down to the root cause as to why is something happening. And it's not because my manager doesn't like me. That's very surface level. When you get down to the actual root cause, you see that there's a lack of consequence management, for example. So this person has now been empowered to take the law into his or her hands, do as they wish and get away with it. And that for me is where the buck has to stop. Is where we need to call this out and where we need to draw attention to ahead of Workers' Day to say there's certain behaviors that are unacceptable. You know, and even if you've got to send it out in a mailer to say, if you're an employee and you may not have spaces in the seat at the table, for example, you can still reach out and your matter will be treated confidentially. And more importantly, we as leadership are going to take action to address it.
For sure.
You know, there's this theory of the one fly that worries people, and you've got to hit it really hard until it dies, until the other flies realize that this behavior is not, we don't do this, because that's what happens. I think it's important. It's very important.
Find her on LinkedIn. She says she enjoys that platform. These days she's having much like the conversation we're having today. So do find her, Kovini Moodley. She's a governance, risk and compliance expert. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you so much for this. It's always beautiful being here at Soundcare Radio. And only good vibes. So thank you so much for having me.
Vibes only. Thank you.
Enjoy your audacious banking experience.
Thank you.